Alright, what's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Shadowlands video. How's everybody doing? Oh, let's start here. What's going on? Look at the polar bear. Look at this thing. Oh, he's very shiny. We got the cute polar bear. How's everybody doing? Happy New Year, to everybody. Hope you guys had a good holiday. And I actually worked on New Year's, which was fine. Extra money. But, I didn't do any crazy partying or anything. But I hope you guys had a good time. Hope your New Year's is good. Hope everything's going well for you guys. We're going to look today at a comparison video. We're going to break down 4 shaman builds. Now, I've been doing videos showcasing each of the different shaman builds, right? So we've been looking at Doomwins. I took Doomwins for a spin. We did the Feral Wolves build, Witch Doctor Wolf Bones, where you get your wolves back really quick. We did the Storm Strike build, which is the legacy of the Frost Witch, which is an interesting build. It's every time you use a Maelstrom Spender, 5-stack Maelstrom Spender, you get Storm Strike back. So it has this kind of interesting cadence to it. And then we did the Fire build with Primal Lava Actuators, right? So I have looked at, I've done all 4 of those builds in different videos for you guys, but now I've taken each one of those into a Mythic Plus dungeon, at least a plus 10 for all the dungeons. Some of them were a little higher, some were a little lower. Not lower, sorry. Some were like plus 10, some were 11, some were 12. I think one was a 15. I did a couple of 15s, but I didn't get to record them all. I took them all for a spin in, I would say, middle of the pack Mythic Plus dungeons, and we got the results. We have all the numbers on how much damage they did, what was the breakdown, and I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to show you guys exactly what each build did, and I'm going to show you, talk about what the playstyle looks like, and I'm going to compare damage numbers. That's definitely coming, but I want to just say, first of all, that the point of this video is not to just say that one is better than the other, because TLDR, spoiler alert, they're all actually pretty close in damage. They're actually all fairly similar. It really just depends on a lot of other factors, like how well you play the character, how good is the rest of your group, how often are you required to do um, other things. I don't want to say things, but how often are you required to help your team out in other ways? So, like, do you need to kick? As a shaman, we have a very powerful kick, right? I think it's the best kick in the game. Do you need to be kicking stuff like Rebellious Fist in Spires of Ascension or Drain Fluids in Necrotic Wake, right? There are abilities that are like really important. How often are you using Cap Totem? And how often do you have to heal? Maybe you have to do some off healing. I have to do that a bunch of times in these dungeons because people are just dying. And if everybody dies, then we wipe, right? So there's a lot of other factors that go into dungeons, and it's important to understand that. I'm going to flip over to this. It's important to understand that it's not just about doing damage. It's about all these other things as well. So look at these. I got these 4 tabs here. These are the 4 different builds that I did. We're going to start with Doomwins. Okay? So the overall in Doomwins was 7.1k. You can see it in the bottom here. This is how this setup's going to be. This is my damage breakdown, right? I was in a Sanguine Depths here. I believe. Oh no, this was the Halls of Atonement. So this was the last one I just did. It was a 12 Halls of Atonement, and let me just confirm that really quick. Look at this here. 12 Halls of Atonement. Yes, there's a 12 Halls of Atonement. I believe there's a 12 Plague in here. There's a 10 Spires of Ascension. That was the fire build. And then I think there's a 16 Necrotic Wake. Or a 15. Anyway, I'll look at it in a second. But back to this, back to Chrome. So, excuse me. Before I get into all 4 of these builds, I'm always running roughly the same setup. I am Kyrian. We'll talk about Covenants in a minute. I know you're all going to be screaming about Night Fae. I understand. Night Fae is good. And I understand it has some more synergies, but that's fine. I happen to be Kyrian, so I just ran with Kyrian. Excuse me, okay? So we are Kyrian, we are Mechanicos every time. The only thing that changes is some of our conduits. When I did the fire build, for example, I had to switch to the Lava Lash conduit that gets more crit. It gives you like 20% more crit for Lava Lash. When I switched to the Doomwinds build, I'm obviously taking the Wind Fury, has a chance to trigger a 3rd attack. And then when I was on the other 2 builds, they center more around Storm Strike, and the dogs don't have a conduit, so I just took the Maelstrom stack conduit, which buffs your like damage per Maelstrom stack, right? By like 2.5%. So the conduits do change a little bit, but I'm always taking Vesper Totem, I'm always taking Mechanicos, and then the talents also change. And that's just, that's just the way it goes, right? So if I switch to the game back for a second, in Doomwins, for the Doomwins build, I'm obviously running Forceful Wind, Storm Flurry. For like the Fire build, I'm going Ellie Blast, Hot Hand. I did keep a sentence for the Fire build. For the Storm Strike build, I'm back to Storm Flurry. I think I kept Ellie Blast. I can't. I'll check in the thing in a second. No, the Storm Strike build, I actually tried Earth and Spike, which was really fun because it really is more of a single target funneling build. I'll get to that in a second. And then in the Feral Wolves build, I'm obviously taking Feral Wolves, and I took Storm Flurry instead of Hot Hand for the Feral Wolves build, and I did go Ellie Blast for the Wolves build as well. So there's some slight differences in talents just because there like has to be. So I can't. These builds are not going to be like one for one perfect because I can't do that because you have to switch up your build a little bit. You have to switch your conduits a little bit. But everything that I could keep the same, I did. So I ran Mechanicos, Vesper Totem, and then my eye level was roughly the same. My trinkets stayed the same. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Doomwins, what are we looking at? I'm gonna give you a really quick overview of all the overall numbers. So Doomwins did 7.1, Feral Wolves was 6.3, Primal Lava was 6.2, and then we had 7.5 for the Storm Strike build. Now, what I will say about the Storm Strike build dungeon, and this is what I'm going to say about all these dungeons, is that it was a longer dungeon. So let me just look if I have it here in my actual details breakdown. It's not this one. I think I have to go back too far. 6.2. Let me just bear with me for a second here. The Plague Fall. No. So there you go. Yeah, it's not on my details chart here, but that's okay. So this was a longer dungeon by like I think 6 or 7 minutes. Um, so that's going to skew the damage numbers a little bit, but I actually think that this would hover around the 7K mark. So like Doomwins was 7.1, and maybe it could be more. I didn't play it super well. My eye level's not amazing. I'm only like 235. So and then Fire the Wolves was 6.3, and Primal Lava was 6.2, and then Storm Strike build, the Witch Legacy of the Frostwitch build was 7.5. So that's the overall breakdown of them. Now, again, the Mythic Plus dungeon levels were all a little bit different. They were between 11 and 15. But again, I'm always getting the same. I took all the same buffs from the tormentors, so those buffs are always the exact same, which is another important factor because they add a lot of damage. You can see if we're looking right now at this, we're looking at this breakdown of the Doomwinds build. The necrotic wound dot. That's one of the powers that you take. I had that on every single one. Necrotic wound, necrotic wound, necrotic wound. Right. So it did 4.7 there. It did 5.8 there. It did 4.9 here, and it did 5.0 here. So percentage-wise, so it averages to probably like 5% on every single pull. And you can see things are different. Like Vesper Totem for Doomwinds did 5.5%. It did 6.1 for the Feral build. It did 5.2 for the Lava Lash build, and it did 6.4 on the Legacy of the Frostwitch. The Legacy of the Frostwitch build was longer than all the other dungeons, so we should just subtract probably a little bit of the overall. You're going to do, I think, more damage as if the dungeons go longer because you're going to have a chance to use things like brittle, like your trinkets. You're going to have a chance to use those more. All of your cooldowns, you have a chance to use them more. So I think that it should be lower just a tiny bit, maybe from 7.5 to like 7.2 or something. But the main takeaway that I want to think about, that I want to talk about, is that these are all so similar, man. Sure, these are a little bit lower. The Feral Wolves and the Primal Lava look a little bit lower. I think that Doomwinds is 7.1, and the Legacy of the Frostwitch build was 7.5, probably more like 7.2 or something. Those are look like the leaders in terms of just straight overall damage. And the other two look like they're a little bit behind, but really it actually has a huge amount to do with how you play. And I might not have played perfectly in any of these dungeons, but they're not that far off from each other. Okay, it's not like it's not like Doomwins is doing 10k and the Feral Wolves build and the Lava Lash build are doing 6k. That's not the difference. The difference is not like 4k overall. The difference is like less than 1k HP. It's this is 800 DPS, 900 DPS away from Doomwins, and probably 9 or maybe 900 DPS away from the Storm Strike build as well. I know the Storm Strike build doesn't do. It's not that much better. So My point is, these are all pretty close in damage, and so you could play any of them. Like if you just want to play one of these four builds, go for it. If you like the Stormstrike resetting build, which is kind of like a BFA build, then go for it. If you like the lava one, go for it. If you want the wolves, if you want Doomwins, you can pick and choose whatever you want. Here's one other point I want to make about this is that the ease of execution is higher on both the Doomwinds build and the Legacy of the Frostwitch or the Stormstrike build. Look at the Stormstrike build first of all. This down here. I just want to highlight the Stormstrike casts down here. 450 casts of Stormstrike, and it hit almost 1,200 times. That's because of Storm Flurry. Um, Storm Flurry just because you're casting Stormstrike so much more often than normal. Your Storm Strike damage is really high. Look at our Storm Strike damage. It did 2.43 million. Storm Strike did 20% of our damage. Look at Doomwinds. Storm Strike does 11% here. Feral Wolves, it did 14% of our damage. And for the fire build, you're not really pressing Storm Strike as much, so it's obviously not going to do as much. But on the Stormstrike build, you really do press it a lot more. 450 presses because you're just like Stormstrike, Spender, Stormstrike, Spender, Stormstrike again. It keeps getting you that back, right? So it's a really fun, cool playstyle that way. But it hit 1,181 times, which is kind of hilarious. The ease of execution is what I was trying to talk about. Doomwinds and I think the Stormstrike build both have a higher level of difficulty to play than the Feral Wolves and the Lava Lash one do. The Lava Lash one just simply says you spread your Flame Shocks whenever they're off cooldown, and it buffs your Lava Lash damage, and you press Lava Lash. If you get a Hot Hand proc, you press Hot Hand. That's what you're doing. It does the most amount of damage possible. Feral Wolf says you press Feral Wolves. That's what you do. And then you just do your regular rotation. Nothing else really changes, okay? The Storm Strike build, Legacy of the Frost Switch says you press Storm Strike, and if you get a proc of Storm Strike, you need to press it again right away. You have to get Storm Strike on cooldown, then you can use a spender to get it off cooldown again. And there's a bit of a mini game there. It can be more difficult to manage. It's not that hard, but like because I've played it a lot now, it's not hard at all. But when you first get into it, you're gonna screw it up a lot. Where you're like, you'll press Storm Strike, and then you'll have your Lightning Bolt will light up, and you'll be like, oh, I want to press my Maelstrom Spender, but your Storm Strike is actually off cooldown, so you need to press that again, then press your Spender, or else you just wasted an entire buff, and that's the whole point of the build. So, um, very, very cool. It's a fun mini game to play. Ease of execution is a little bit harder than these other two, and then I think Doomwinds is the hardest. And let me just take a drink for a sec. Doomwinds is the hardest to execute because it's a 1 minute cooldown. If you didn't know, Doomwinds has a 1 minute internal cooldown. It gives you a debuff for 1 minute, so you can't benefit from Doomwinds again for that 1 minute. So that makes it a great cooldown. A 1 minute cooldown in Mythic Plus is fantastic. You can use it on like almost every pack, probably every other pack. The difficulty with this build comes when you are trying to line up your cooldown with Ascendants, especially when you're trying to line it up with bosses and making sure you have Doomwinds and Ascendants ready to go for a boss. That's huge. Doomwinds plus Ascendants is the most burst that you can do, I think, on Enhancement Shaman, period. There's nothing that's gonna top the Doomwinds Ascendants burst, because you're just gonna in AoE, I'm talking an AoE situation, if you have like 5 to 10 targets, if you put down your Wind Fury Totem and then pop Ascendants, you will do crazy, crazy amounts of AoE damage with Crash Lightning and with Wind Strike. So it's good, except that depending on how your group is pulling, and that's probably why I didn't do maybe as much damage in this dungeon as some of you guys might think, oh, 7.1 is kind of low overall. I mean, 7.1 is okay overall. It's actually not that bad, but I could have been higher probably. Part of that has to do with the group that I was running with and maybe the tank that I was running with. He didn't pull, like, there were multiple times I remember in this dungeon. This was the hulls that I just did. You pulled the first chunk of hauls at the very beginning. He only pulled like two of those packs. He pulled the patrol and then the center guys. Usually you pull like all four of the packs that are all around the halls of atonement at the beginning, and you lust it, and you're hitting like 10 to 12 mobs. We were only hitting like 6. So I blew my cooldowns, my big burst there, and it just didn't do as much damage because the tank didn't pull them all in for me. So that's part of it. The group that you're running with will always change kind of what you're doing on your character. But that's the only thing I would say about all these different builds. The other three the other two, Feral Wolves, Lava, and the Lava Lash build, they're very, very easy to execute. The Storm Strike build, a little bit harder to execute. You don't want to mess up. You don't want to ever spend Maelstrom if you have a Storm Strike ready to go. Doomwins is definitely the most difficult to execute, just to make sure that you line up Ascendance and the Doomwins buff at the same time. You really have to do that because all of your damage is focused now on a 1 minute cooldown. The rest of the builds that are here, the Stormstrike build, the Feral Wolves, and the Primal Lava, they are all consistently doing damage all the time. You can't really screw them up because like you can screw up the Stormstrike one a little bit, but not even it's not that hard. It's not hard to do it right. And the point is that you there's no big cooldown to screw up. If you mess up your Doomwins totem placement timing, or like you're getting ready for the tank to get aggro on like the 10 mobs that he just pulled, and you wait for a second, and then you drop your Wind Fury totem and you press Ascendance and you go, and you instantly pull 100% aggro on like a couple of the mobs because with Enhancement Shaman, it's very, very easy to do with the Doomwinds build. Sometimes they'll just turn and hit you and you die, and then you're like, okay, well, now my entire thing was wasted, right? So I'm not saying that that's anything that you could have done better, but sometimes the group that you're running with can really mess you up that way. You need a really good tank, or else it can be kind of frustrating. So the ease of execution, I think, the burden is on the Doomwinds players. They need to play much better. They have to time that cooldown really, really well, or else because all your damage is wrapped up in this 1 minute cooldown. Versus the Stormstrike build, all of your damage is wrapped up in the Storm Strikes that you're constantly pressing over and over and over and over again. The Feral Wolves, you just all your damage is wrapped up in these wolves. Look at the damage here, the breakdown. Elemental Raptors did 9%. That's just their melee attacks. That did 9% of my damage. That's pretty good, right? Um, and then the buffs that they give you are down further. You can't see the lightning buff because it buffs Stormstrike. But the point is that's pretty cool to see there. And then the lava, the lava build obviously is all about flame shock, and all about lava lash and the damage that you're getting from there. So the damage profiles are very, very different. The last thing I'm just going to touch on is that the play styles are different as well. Like I said with Doomwinds, it's every 1 minute your damage just goes boom. It just goes to the moon, right? And then you kind of go back down a little bit. The rest of the time, you're maybe doing like 5, 6K. Um, but then you can just spike whenever you want. You can choose on single target. Do I want to pop Doomwinds and Ascendants on this single target boss on a Tyrannical week? Probably. So that's a really cool option that you have. Or you can pop it on AoE packs and have a lot of damage there as well. But these other three are really, really consistent, and they don't ever have excuse me, they don't ever have massive spikes like the Doomwinds one does, but they're always just like going to be consistently at a good level, right? Um, you're always going to be doing like between 8 to 12 or 8 to 13K, maybe up to 15K if you're lucky, but generally speaking, you're never going to go higher than that. Whereas Doomwinds has the potential to go up to like 25K, big burst of 25K. So that's the difference in the four builds. And this is the damage breakdown again. The lava one did about 6.2 overall, lava lash being our highest damage. Um, Feral Wolves build, the Feral Wolves themselves did about 9% of our damage, which was really awesome to see. This was in a Plague Fall that I did. I had 6.3k overall. The Stormstrike build, Stormstrike is obviously number one. It does 20% of our damage, and it hit almost 1,200 times throughout the course of the dungeon because of Storm Flurry. Very, very cool interaction. I really love playing this build, actually. Um, and then Doomwinds, which of course Wind Fury attack is going to be, it's almost 20% of our damage again. So that is the breakdown there. The last thing I'm going to touch on is that yes, you can play Night Fae Night Fae is probably the better way to go for a lot of these different builds. It doesn't make all the difference in the world. Like Vesper Totem still was fine. It did 5 to 6% of my damage in all these different. There's 6% there. There's 6.4% there, and 5.2, and this was 5.5. So like Vesper Totem is no slouch. It's there. It's doing damage. Fey Transfusion just has the chance to give you those other buffs, like the Naya Mastery buff. 400 Mastery is no joke, so that's a pretty cool thing. If you're playing like Doomwinds, you can channel Fey Transfusion, then drop Wind Fury Totem, then pop Ascendance, and like your damage will probably be monstrous. So I think Night Fae might be the better way to go. But Kyrian is not bad. It's something if you want to play Kyrian with Mechanicos, you can do it as well. So there you go, guys. There is my breakdown of the four different builds playing as Kyrian, playing with Mechanicos. The talents were different, the conduits were different. but the powers that I chose inside the dungeons were the same. And my gear was roughly the same. I think I always had the same trinkets and all the rest of the same gear, except the legendaries obviously changed. So that's what it looks like. I think that my biggest conclusion here is that they're actually pretty close. And it really has a lot more to do with the rest of the group, how your tank is pulling, if you're going to die on a pull, how defensively do you have to play. There's a bunch of other things at work here, right? In a Mythic Plus dungeon, there's so many other things that you need to think about. It's not just, can I stand still and press Storm Strike 50 times in a row and get my Doomwins perfectly down every single time? It's not going to work perfectly every time. It's not. Maybe the rest of the damage of your team is going to be like really low. Like I had that in a couple of my dungeons where the other guys weren't doing a ton of damage. Um let's look at this is a pretty good example here. Look at this overall, my Feral Wolves, right? I did 6.3 overall. The next guy didn't even do 5k. 4.5k, 4.9, 3.7. So like they were doing okay, but I was carrying the damage on this one. And so sometimes it's just the way it is. It means that it might modify your cooldowns and you have to go with the flow and be like, okay, it looks like we're about 2 to 3 packs away from the first boss. I don't really want to use my cooldowns, I don't think, but if I only have like, if I was playing Doomwins, let's say, and I had Ascendance up, I should probably pop those things because I'm the one carrying the bulk of the damage. You have to think dynamically when you're in the middle of the dungeon and use your abilities accordingly. It's not always just going to be super cut and dry what you have to do. So, but that's it. That's the breakdown. You guys can play any of these builds if you want to. They are all a ton of fun to play. So get out there if you haven't tried the Legacy of the Frost Witch build or the Witch Doctor Wolf Bones or the Primal Lava Actuator builds. Please go try them out because they're tons and tons of fun. And let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.